Good afternoon. I am Marisa Scalera, landscape architect with Smithsonian Gardens, and I am speaking to you today from the Kogod Courtyard in the Donald W. Reynolds Center for American Art and Portraiture. This is the site of our 2022 Orchid Exhibition and seemed like the perfect place to talk to you about exhibit development and exhibit design process. First, stepping back to talk a little bit about the history of our orchid exhibits. This is the 26th year of our collaboration with the U.S. Botanic Garden. For the last 26 years, we've been co-hosting an annual orchid exhibition with USBG. The exhibit alternates sites, alternates locations. Every other year, Smithsonian Gardens co-hosts. In 2022, it's our turn to host. Each year at the close of one exhibit that we've hosted, we begin planning for the next exhibit that Smithsonian Gardens will host. So in 2019, at the close of our Amazing Adaptations Orchid exhibit, we began thinking about our orchid exhibit that will come in 2022. This orchid exhibit began with the kernel of an idea. This was an idea that was brought to our orchid exhibit team by Smithsonian Gardens Museum specialist Kelly Crawford. She had the idea, what if we were to think about an orchid exhibit that centered around the work of Mary Vaux Walcott. Mary Vaux Walcott is an American illustrator and naturalist, and she has a collection of her illustrations here in the Smithsonian American Art Museum, which is also located here at the Donald W. Reynolds Center. So it seemed like a perfect pairing. So my role in this project as landscape architect, exhibit designer, and project manager is to shepherd this exhibit through the exhibit development process and the exhibit design process, working with our full Smithsonian Gardens team, many of whom you will meet during this session today, and also with our colleagues across the institution, including and particularly colleagues from Smithsonian Exhibits. They brought to our team an exhibit developer, an exhibit designer, a graphic designer, a script writer, and a project manager who assisted in the development of this exhibition. I had the great pleasure of working closely with that full team to develop this exhibit.
My role with the development of the design is more of a grand scheme planner. My initial duties with Smithsonian Gardens is designing interior exhibits, but I've morphed into more of a generalist's role in that I interact with the orchid collection staff, the designers of Smithsonian exhibits, any curators that were involved with the specific museums where our exhibit is being displayed, along with our interior staff, our greenhouse staff, and any members of our exterior staff that want to partake in the installation and de-installation of our exhibit.
My role with the orchid exhibition was to be a member of the core team. We helped pick a theme, work on the script, design, research the different women. I was assigned to research botanical artists and botanical illustrators. So first I started by doing a search and just bringing together a whole list of different artists and illustrators. And then I narrowed it down even more and looked specifically for women that had illustrated different orchids, because this is an orchid exhibition. So once we got the list, which was quite a long one, we brought it back to the core team and we went through each woman and their different stories and narrowed it down to ones that had not only amazing artwork or illustrations that were scientifically accurate, but also had really interesting stories.
I think I can best describe my role in the exhibit by talking about the three tasks that I had. First of all, I am a horticulturist and a biologist, so I'm one of the scientists of the group. That means I was tasked with researching all the women orchidologists, which are the scientists that study orchids. So we wanted to find women to highlight in our panels, and we wanted them to come from different time periods, to have accomplished things in their field and had unique stories. So we have these criteria for choosing them. We also wanted to highlight one of our own Smithsonian scientists. So based on these criteria, I researched online a lot of women orchidologists and came up with a list of 11 of them. But since we could only fit 3 in our science panel, then came a process of selection. That meant I needed to get to know them better. So reading articles and even biographical books that were done about them. For our own scientists, I went to personally interview her, tour the research lab that she works at. All this research goes on so we can best choose who's going to be highlighted in the panels. The 3 we chose include an Australian naturalist who's very well known for her groundbreaking research done with orchid pollination. Then there's also a Polish scientist. She works currently at a university in Poland, and she's a plant taxonomist. So she's named and revised over 400 species of orchids. And then our own researcher, she works for the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center doing orchid, native and tropical orchid research in ecology. When working on researching the script, we not only had to provide written content, but also choose the images that were going on the panels. A moment I remember nicely is that related to the orchid taxonomist, I wanted to choose an image that was not just another orchid photo. So I decided it would be really neat to show people what a specimen at a herbarium looks like. So I went online to Kew Gardens. They have this catalog of all the herbaria specimens that are found around the world. And I found orchids that she has named and found a really good photo that depicts how that looks. And I wanted to be a didactic image for people to learn about taxonomy. A second role I had was to help with the bilingual panels. As the museums and the Smithsonian Gardens always want to include 2 languages when possible. In this case, it is Spanish. And since I'm a Spanish speaker and a scientist, I was able to help revise the official translation. And in this case, I can provide revisions with the technological biological terms and help make sure that the translation is the correct one for our exhibit. And a final minor role I had, in this case, is due to the fact that I'm the horticulturist that takes care of this space on a weekly basis. Sometimes I was asked to take on-site measurements. For example, if we want to put prop elements in the beds, where should they go? I knew exactly where the root systems of the trees were. We don't want to damage our collection trees. So helping measure where do we put the elements. Also, sometimes gadgets that we wanted to use to hold them in the soil. Is our soil good for the kind of things we want to use? So I tested those. Or for example, once we chose a surface for the elements, we wanted to test the opacity, so bring it over to the side, look at it at different times of day to determine which reflectivity was going to be better for us. Things that related to on-site measurements, I was able to do because I come here on a weekly basis.
The role I played was we did a lot of research trying to find the stories of women, especially related to orchid cultivation, teaching about orchids through publications, as well as women who were collectors of orchids or sought orchids in the wild. It was quite an interesting experience, and I learned a lot before I really hadn't heard these stories of the women that are highlighted in the exhibition. The role of a collection manager is to document, describe, and conserve and build your collection moving forward. So I have a team, on the Living Collections team, we have folks who accession plants, who catalog those plants, and to really build out those descriptive records. We have a photographer who takes pictures of our living collections so that we can use them for reference to be sure the taxonomy is correct, also to help educate our public about our collection. And then we also do a lot of things as a collection technician, helping us to create labels and to label our plants and to georeference them if they're in the gardens versus being inside the greenhouse.
So my role within the exhibition was making sure that we had collection items ready for the exhibition, but also when it came to the planning, I was looking through our collection archives and our collection holdings and making sure that we would have collection items for display during the exhibition. Also, in preparation for the exhibition, prepping all the plants, getting them ready for exhibition, also organizing the transportation to the exhibition.
So we took and we built an exhibit based on this idea, these hidden stories of these groundbreaking women. who have made huge strides in their respective fields as they pertain to orchids. And so we began with a big idea. We developed our key messages. We thought through our critical questions, thought through how we could tie this back into a larger exhibit. And what we have today is Orchids: Hidden Stories of Groundbreaking Women. It highlights the work of 15 women across a variety of different types of fields, spanning from art through science.
Essentially, when we design an orchid exhibit, we have to remember that the primary aspect of the design and of the overall theme of the exhibit is the fact that we're displaying live plants and we're displaying collection pieces, and any content that is within this exhibit has to not only tell the story that we want to convey to the public, but also really highlight the orchids. And in turn, the orchids that we select for the design has to highlight the content. So although neither one can overpower the other, they both have to meld together. And then a third aspect is any props you use need to complement both of those as well. So it's a multifaceted process of getting everything not only to complement each other, but when you install it, it all has to look like it's fluid and everything just works within the other piece, and they all work together to develop this overall view for the public.
What I brought to the exhibition team was I'm a seasoned horticulturist with Smithsonian Gardens. I've worked on multiple orchid exhibitions in the past, so I have a feeling of how they work and can bring that know-how from past exhibitions. I am also a designer and project manager for multiple other exhibitions that Smithsonian Gardens has done. And I am an environmental science major, so I also bring the scientific know-how and actually helped with some other members make sure that the science was well represented and that science was accurate within the exhibition. A point that we really wanted to drive home is the difference between a botanical illustrator and a botanical artist. So a botanical illustrator, the emphasis is on science rather than visual art. There are true and lifelike representations of the plant. You should highlight the plant's particular distinguishing features which enable botanists to tell one plant from another. This also includes accurate measurements of different plant parts. The illustrators consult with botanists, and their work is judged on scientific accuracy, not beauty, even though most of them tend to be very beautiful as well. And if you look at the image on the left, this is an example of a botanical illustration. If we move over to botanical artists, their work is not intended for use in scientific publications. They're often drawn as plants in their natural habitat. It doesn't need to depict all the parts of the plant and does not need to be scientifically accurate. It emphasizes artistic expression, as you can see on the drawing on the right.
When it comes to the viewpoints, I think I also brought 3 viewpoints. The first one is that of the female scientist. Being a scientist, I was always concerned with making sure we got the science right. That's important to me. The second viewpoint would be the one of a Spanish speaker. For example, when we were choosing a title for the exhibit, I wanted to make sure it translated well. And for example, one of the cases was, no, that's not translatable, that doesn't relate to Spanish speakers. So it's good to have somebody that speaks the language that we're also representing in the exhibit or translating to. And the third viewpoint would be the one of the horticulturist on site. Because I'm here weekly, I'm also gonna take care of the orchids when they're here. It gives a perspective of how to best place things in the beds, making sure we take care of the plantings.
Well, the viewpoint that I bring as a living collections manager is thinking about the collection from a long-term preservation and conservation perspective. We have this collection and we need to maintain it within all of its necessary cultural requirements, as well as having the right resources to build the collection moving forward. So I think I brought a holistic approach to collections management and stewardship to this project.
So the viewpoint I brought was, of course, the plant geek inside of me, and also the orchophile. I love orchids and love anything about orchids. And so it was really nice to kind of put my input and my twist from a horticulture standpoint within the exhibition, and also telling the story and the history of orchids in the US and the world.
I think some of the challenges we face is actually how we get the plants from point A to point B. This collection is held off-site in a greenhouse facility that's nearly 7 miles from the location where the exhibition takes place. This exhibition also takes place in the wintertime. So imagine taking tropical plants out of their tropical environment, putting them onto carts, and then loading them onto into vehicles to transport them, and then offloading them. It's a lot of moving parts. And many of these orchids are very sensitive to temperature variations, as well as some of the orchid blossoms, their flower spikes can be very brittle. So you have to be very careful. Just thinking about how many people are involved in this process from start to finish, from Justin on site working with the collection, to volunteers that are helping, interns that help, contractors, and then moving the plants to the next location, and then taking them off the carts and putting them into the exhibition. There's a lot of people involved in that process, and we want to be very thoughtful and conscious about handling the plants properly. So I think that probably, to me, is one of the largest challenges. We've done this over so many years that we've really gotten very good at growing these beautiful plants. It's more the challenge of moving them from point A to point B.
Some of the challenges that we've been able to excel in is dealing with a living orchid collection. You can imagine this one greenhouse that we're standing in has over 2,000 plants in it, and there's 3 more, so a total of 4 houses. So you can imagine there's a lot of moving parts. And also with living collections, something might be blooming one day, the next day it fades, or it could be deaccessioned because it is no longer in the collection. A living collection also fluctuates in terms of numbers and what we actually have in our collection when it comes to our collection goals and our stewardship plan. Our collection here, as you see, is just getting ready and bursting at the seams, ready to go on display for the exhibition. It's one of the challenges is just making sure that all the pieces align and making sure that the climate and climate controlled greenhouses align with the blooming of the orchids, and also align with our exhibition dates and planning and getting them prepped and on for display. Also, integrated pest management, so making sure that the insects are not on the collection items and making sure that they're free of various pathogens. That's a big thing with living collections. So there again, making sure that we're not contaminating other collections within the museums or our partners that we work with, similar as the US Botanic Garden. And so there again, just making sure that our collection items are held safe and safeguarded while on display.
Our goal with this is to draw the public in with our orchid collection, draw the public in with these large-scale representations of orchids, large orchid botanical illustrations, large-scale orchid art, draw the public in with this beautiful display, and then be able to hook them and get the public interested and thinking about the stories of these women, the hidden stories of these groundbreaking women.
As educators, one of our primary goals is also to make sure that the story we are telling is conveyed to the public in a way that they'll understand it, they'll learn from it, and they'll walk away with something from the exhibit. And I guess also what we want to do, what my goal is as a designer, is to, as I mentioned previously, to not let one of these aspects overpower the other. The public will understand that the important story is told because we feel it's something that they can take away from the exhibit, and also we want to make sure that they understand the importance of our collection piece. And we want, as stewards of our orchid collection, the Smithsonian Gardens Orchid Collection, it is our duty to bring this collection to the public every other year when we host it here, and then every other year when the Botanic Gardens hosts it. But we want to show the public that that orchids are so varied, and they're not just beautiful blooms. They're important in so many ways, and how they've inspired the women that we're featuring in this exhibit to become more involved in the study of orchids, the artistic interpretation of orchids, how those women were really connected to these plants. We want the public to also feel that connection, and we really are able to achieve that by this amazing design that you'll see, this amazing collection of plants, and this really well thought out interpretation that our Smithsonian Exhibits group has presented for you, for the public rather. And I believe that once the public goes through this, because we've received the money from the American Women's History Initiative to really take this exhibit to the next level, the design of the exhibit just reached a whole nother echelon, and we are able to incorporate other aspects of this beautiful space into the design, not just the beds.
I really hope that little girls come to this exhibit, and also young, older women as well, and just feel empowered by the stories of these different women through time, and can realize that women are important in science and art, and it's okay to follow your dreams, and you can make a difference. Don't worry about what other people think.
I hope that the public really appreciates how amazing it is to put together all these women with empowering stories that contribute to the art and science of the world of orchids. But most importantly, being a scientist, I'm so excited about the fact that we're going to be inspiring young girls that want to potentially pursue a career in science, and they can see examples of what other women have done in the field. So that's really exciting to me.
I really hope that the public learns that women have been part of this orchid story, although, you know, I hadn't really heard much about women who were involved with orchids before this project. And so I really hope they realize that there's a voice for women and people of color who haven't been highlighted in the orchid stories of the past, and that we can see there's a place for everyone working and enjoying orchids.
Yeah, so I hope everyone learns how fabulous and wonderful orchids are and how diverse they are, but also that orchids are for everybody. One of the most exciting things about the family Orchidaceae, aka the orchid family, is their diversity. Whether it's their size, their color, their fragrance, how they grow, epiphyte growing on a tree, terrestrial on the ground. You can see here we've pulled just a few examples from our collection that highlights the biodiversity of the orchids within our collection. Beautiful Cattleya, which is the corsage orchid, beautiful Phragmipedium, a Psychopsis over here, more Cattleyas, Phragmipedium, and then a Habenaria medusa. So it's really cool seeing as they bloom. You never know what you're going to get. And what's lovely about managing this collection is you kind of forget, but once they bloom, it's like meeting an old friend again.